Cooper Flagg goes off on the day Johni Broome goes down. Did the National Player of the Year race just flip?
You are Locked On College Basketball, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, folks? Happy Monday, and welcome into the Locked On College Basketball Podcast, a daily national college hoop show, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We are your co-hosts. I'm Andy Patton. He is Isaac Shade. And you are joining us at the place to get your college basketball content every single day. I want to give a special shout out to those everyday listeners and those of you hanging out with us in the Locked On College Basketball Discord channel. There's a link in the show notes if you want to come join us. Today's episode is brought to you all by Game Time. Folks, download the Game Time app now, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Want to once again remind you all that we have started our Locked On College Basketball Game Night episode Saturday evenings. Leaf Tulane, who typically joins us on Wednesday shows, he is hosting Saturday evening shows after all of the games are over live. You can find the show on YouTube. You can find it on your preferred podcast platform. Last couple of weeks, he's been joined by Isaac. Next Saturday, he'll be joined by myself. He's also going to have some other rotating guests throughout the time. It's a great opportunity to get live, instant reaction to all of the action on Saturday, whereas Isaac and I are going to take more of a big picture look at the weekend and kind of what it meant for college basketball. That's what we're doing today. We're talking about the National Player of the Year race, especially in light of Cooper Flagg's monster game against Notre Dame and Johni Broome's injury, which we have an update on that. We're also going to talk some Big Ten action. Illinois goes down at home to USC. Mick Cronin getting tossed from a game after challenging his team last week. We got some other Big Ten stuff to get to, some major injuries that we want to talk about as well, and then a six-pack to close out the show. We'll talk Pat Kelsey already matching Kenny Payne in wins in his first 17 games at Louisville, the biggest regulation comeback in NCAA history, and the best player in the country that nobody is talking about. But Isaac, before we get to all of that, let's start the conversation. The last 2 years, every year that we have done this podcast, we haven't really been able to have a whole lot of conversation about the National Player of the Year race, except to say, well, who's going to finish second behind Zach Edey? This year, there is actual debate, there is conversation, there's discourse around the National Player of the Year race. And folks, it just changed significantly over the weekend with Cooper Flagg having a monster 42-point, 7 assists, 6 rebound performance against Notre Dame, the player that many have questioned whether he is offensively talented enough to be the player of the year, to be the first overall pick, goes out and drops 40 in a conference game for the Blue Devils. Meanwhile, Johni Broome suffers an ankle injury. Don't exactly know the amount of time that he's going to be out for Auburn, but an incredibly critical piece, not only for the Tigers, but a player that's been in that conversation and been at the front of that conversation throughout the season, the best player on arguably the best team in the sport. And between the injury to Broome and the obviously monster game from Flagg that we saw, this conversation is starting to shift. Isaac, kind of what are your thoughts on this pretty interesting and more not as easy to predict National Player of the Year race that we have this season?
Yeah, Andy. Well, first off, for those wondering, we talked more in depth about the Duke game. We talked more in depth about the Auburn game, the rest of the SEC and the Big 12 on Saturday's game night. So if you're interested in hearing more on those games, go check that out. Andy, it really is fun to be able to have this conversation, with all due respect to Zach Edey, man, because it was fun to just see somebody dominate, right? Mm-hmm. Like, from a basketball fan standpoint, I loved it. From a talking points for us, we true to your point, we really did had to revert to take Zach Edey out of the equation. Is it Dalton Knecht or RJ Davis? Like, right. That's the conversation we had last year because we had to find a way to frame it. Mm-hmm. We no longer have to do that. And what's kind of cool is it really has felt like a Cooper Flagg, Johni Broome conversation. Let's give some love to the Cam Jones of the world, the Chaz Laniers. We'll talk about him in a second. Eric Dixon, PJ Haggerty. Interesting that Mark Sears, he's tangentially in the conversation, but not really at, in the top 5 right now. So a whole bunch of really good names. But for me, it is and has been Broome and Flagg. I have been Broome like heavy favorite with Flagg, heavy second, and then a big gap down to third.
Yeah.
Depending on the severity of this injury and length of stay on the disabled list, which we don't even call it in baseball anymore. I still can't call it the IL. What is that? This could be literally a changing of the guard on Saturday because, Andy, we really hadn't had the Cooper Flagg game. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There have been some individual moments, and because of the nature of his game, unlike I think fairly or unfairly, we're going to continue to compare it to Zion and what he did, the walking highlight reel. That's just not Cooper Flagg, and that's okay. But I think casual college basketball fans, they don't recognize the brilliance of Cooper Flagg's game, right? And so you actually have to get in beyond the box score to see it. I think what he's done is phenomenal. What he's going to continue to do is phenomenal. Both of these teams are phenomenal. And so I think it will ultimately be maybe not decided by, but Cooper Flagg's ability to win it is probably dependent on just how long Johni Broome is out.
Yeah. And the latest that we have right now, as we're recording this, is from Matt Norlander. He indicated that Broome is not going to need surgery, which is great. He suffered a sprained left ankle, but it is not a high ankle sprain. It is lower ankle, which is a huge difference in terms of the likely severity of the injury. The report is that he's going to be out at least Auburn's next 2 games. We don't know beyond that, but we know he's going to miss their next 2 games. There are no good games to miss in the SEC. It's just a reality of the conference, unless you're playing South Carolina on back-to-back days.
Which is where they just play, yeah.
Right, exactly. So they got Mississippi State, who's 14-2. They got Georgia, who's 14-2. That Georgia game's on the road. I think Mississippi State's the better team, but again, you got to play Georgia at Georgia. So those are 2 tough games. Auburn is a uniquely well-set-up team to be missing a National Player of the Year candidate, as well set up as a team can be, just because they rely on such a deep lineup, a deep roster, or a deep rotation for this team. So it'll be interesting to see how they play without him. FanDuel currently favors Flagg as the front runner for National Player of the Year for the Wooden Award at -350. Broome's next at +340. But again, this is really seems to be dependent on how long Johni is out with that injury. If he only misses the 2 games and comes back, I think that could flip fairly early, but it does help in Flagg's case that the injury comes at a time when he is really building momentum with this 42-point game. He only missed 4 total shots. He missed 3 field goals, 1 free throw, 7 assists. He's leading Duke in every statistical category. And again, we've seen players do this, but it often happens at the mid-major level. For a player to lead a team in points, rebounds, assists, steals, blocks per game, at a level like Duke, a top 5 team in the country, I mean, it's really, really unprecedented. And yeah, the overall numbers are not as singularly impactful as Zion, and maybe getting compared to him is holding him back a little bit. But the impact he has on this Duke team and their ability to win basketball games, at this point, if you're denying it, I don't know what else to tell you. Like, he is a winner. He is helping this team win games. He is efficient. He's, the overall offensive efficiency hasn't been there all year long. Let's not pretend that he's always been shooting 11 of 14. Like, he hasn't. That's a fair knock on him. 4 of 6 from 3 is better than his typical average, but he's coming around. He's heating up at the right time offensively. It's really hard to deny and ignore the hype that the Flagg train has right now. And frankly, from his last few performances, it's very justified.
Andy, put a Bruce Pearl hat on for a second here. Let's say 2 games from now for Auburn, Johni Broome tells you and the trainers say that he is 80%. Are you putting him in, or is it worth waiting till he's 90 to 96% because of the long-term necessity of having him in your lineup?
Yeah, I think you have to be a bit overly cautious. And again, looking at their schedule, I mean, they got Mississippi State, Georgia are their next 2. If you're telling me, do I play Johni Broome at 80% in their next game after that? Well, that's Tennessee. So like that becomes a lot trickier. Like, you don't want to lose to Tennessee at home without your best player. The risk of playing, if you told me that there's a slight chance that playing Broome against Tennessee, it helps us be more likely to win this game, but there's also, frankly, a realistic outcome where you still lose to Tennessee and you lose Broome for an extended period of time, and he's not back in March, or he's not back for the rest of the season. And that is just not worth it. I suspect Bruce Pearl is going to be extra cautious and is going to wait till Broome is over 90%, 95, or even, I mean, again, the way that they run their lineups, like you could run him out there for 15 minutes and just be extra cautious with him, but still actually let him play in the game. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if that's what we see Bruce Pearl do. But if I was him, I would be far more cautious, because it's a lot, like, people are not going to remember how you do in this Tennessee game necessarily, but they will remember if a second year in a row you get a top 4 seed and you lose in the first round. And they did it last year. They sure as heck do not want to do it again. So that is going to be Bruce Pearl's priority. And that could mean keeping Broome out a little longer than he may necessarily need to be.
Because beyond the Tennessee game, then they're at LSU, at Ole Miss, hosting Oklahoma.
Mm-hmm.
I know 2 of those are on the road. Auburn, as you say, with all their depth and as they're constructed, they should win all 3 of those games, even without Johni Broome. Yeah. And we know that the committee takes into account things like this with star players. So I'm thinking, like, that's a 6-game stretch where even without Johni Broome, you can, I was going to say easily, you can go 5-1. With the only loss to Tennessee, but that game's at home, right? So there's all sorts of possibility with that. And then I wouldn't be shocked in any way if maybe we saw Johni Broome ramp up against Oklahoma at home Tuesday, February 4th, and is fully back Saturday, February 8th. Why? Florida Gators are coming to town. That seems to make a lot of sense to me, Andy. We'll obviously have to see what happens. So much of it's dependent upon how his ankle is. Well, Andy, that's a super fun conversation. We didn't even really get into, like, what does this do for the national championship odds? Because Auburn, thanks to beating South Carolina, is going to move into that 1 spot today when the AP poll comes out. Duke's going to be right there as well. So we got a lot of interesting stuff there. Right now, FanDuel's national championship odds, Duke plus 500, Auburn plus 600. These 2 teams are both cranking, and it's going to be fun to watch. Andy, let's switch, though, to the Big Ten. It's the gift that keeps on giving, because there ain't no elite teams, but man, there's a whole bunch of really good teams. Illinois loses to an unimpressive USC team, while Mick Cronin had another meltdown this weekend. That and more on the Big Ten coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about TurboTax, man, taxes used to be dealing with piles of paperwork and frustrating forms, and then waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back. But now taxes is easy. Uploading your forms to a TurboTax expert who's matched to your unique tax situation. Andy, I think that's super cool. I love the personalization of this from TurboTax, because, like, we have unique stuff here because we're basically, needing 1099 MIST and other stuff like that. It's awesome. So an expert who, by the way, is backed by the latest technology. It's human, it's tech coming together. It's perfect. They've got cross checks for millions of data points that brings 100% accuracy. So while they work on your taxes, you get real-time updates on their progress. It's like when you order a drink in your phone or food in your app, and it's like, oh, look, it's ready now. No stress, no worrying, no waiting. Now this is taxes. Intuit TurboTax. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. It's only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates are only in the iOS mobile app. Sorry to all you people with green text messages. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. All right, Andy, we talked last week about the Big Ten, how basically there was Big Ten action from like that Thursday, and the next time there isn't any is like Monday or Tuesday, February 3rd or 4th, something like that. It's crazy. So we're going to be inundated with Big Ten games all the time. So we actually want to start going back to Saturday, but we'll have some Friday night action, some Sunday action, all of that. USC, just basically like, okay, sure, fine, whatever, right? Goes to Champaign on Saturday, beats Illinois 82-72 to kind of kick off Saturday, by the way. It was like that happened before most people were finished with their coffee, and it's like, what is happening? Because coming into this game too, Andy, was like Illinois is on a 5-game winning streak. They had throttled 2 of their last 3 opponents, beating Oregon at Oregon by 32 and Penn State on Wednesday by 39. Meanwhile, the Muss Bus comes in having lost their last games by double digits against Michigan and at Indiana. And then this comes in. We get a 10-point win for USC. And you had mentioned earlier, injuries played a key part in Saturday's action, either guys that were already hurt that were out or guys that got hurt on Saturday. And unfortunately for Illinois, no Kasparis Jakusionis in this game. And Andy, that made a big difference.
Yeah, it was crazy. Illinois is up 3 at halftime in this game and get outscored by 13 in the second half from a Musselman team that just hasn't been good this year. I mean, they've been a really bad three-point shooting team, and credit to them in this game. They didn't really attempt to make an impact from the three-point line. They only took 14 threes in this game for USC. They instead were just absolutely hell-bent on getting to the paint, getting to the free throw line as much as they could. Desmond Claude had a game that they needed him to have. When USC has been good this year, it has almost always been when Desmond Claude, the Xavier transfer, when he has been on his game, and he had a phenomenal one here. 31 points, 12 of 20, including perfect 7 of 7 from the free throw line. That's what got it done, along with USC's defense. I mean, Illinois, this is one of the better offensive teams in the country, and they looked completely flummoxed in this game. They shot under 22% from three. That was 7 of 32. They were 37% from the field. The combination of Will Riley, Trey Wright, and Keelan Boswell were 8 of 27 from the field, including combined 0 of 12 from three. Again, that's where when you don't have your playmaker, when you don't have your lead guard, Jakusionis, I mean, you could just feel this team not able to generate any kind of offensive rhythm in this one. And again, credit to USC and their defense. They were hounding, they were active on that end of the floor, really slowing down this Illinois team. I want to shout out Boswell's line because it was a really bizarre one. And this is not the first time we've shouted out a bizarre Boswell line on the show. 10 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 5 steals. That's phenomenal. But he was also had 6 turnovers and didn't make any three-pointers. It was just a weird, Boswell's a very good player, and he's a very good defensive player, and he can make things happen. But I think there's a reason that Illinois has gotten a lot out of him when they've had full health, when Jakusionis is in the mix, because he's not quite as adept at doing some of the things that Kasparis does. And that's where you see, again, 6 turnover game here, not making shots. I mean, you like everything else from him, but he's best when he's utilized primarily on the other end of the floor. And in this game, when he was asked to do more, pick up the offense, it didn't work out very well for them. But a big shout out to USC. In the grand scheme of things, doesn't matter much for them. They're ways away from, they're pretty much a Big Ten championship run away from making the NCAA tournament, but hopefully build some momentum for us and for Illinois. I think they'll respond fine to this, but wow, it was an unexpected result to kick off Saturday's action.
And now Illinois falls to tied for 4th in the Big Ten with 5 other schools, Andy, including Oregon, who went to Penn State on Sunday and won 82-81. Penn State, injuries, here we go again. No Ace Baldwin for the Nittany Lions. That's a big deal. And they still, Andy, almost pulled this thing off. They came back in the second half, tied it. Oregon got back out ahead. They tied again. I mean, it was just a really back and forth affair. But Andy, I think the key here for Oregon is they really get stuff going. Oregon now, what are they, 15-2 on the season? Both of those losses in Big Ten play, at home to UCLA, who's since fallen off, obviously, and then at home to Illinois. So 2 home losses, but both understandable games. But the key now is that Jackson Shelstad, who we expected to have a massive sophomore campaign, and he was really struggling at the beginning of this year. But in this game in particular, on Sunday, 17 points, 8 assists, 0 turnovers. I'll take an 8-0 assist to turnover ratio. 7 of 10 from the field, 3 of 5 from 3. And when you look at his splits, Andy, first 12 games of the year, Shelstad's averaging 10 points a game, 10.3, shooting 35.8% from the floor, just 25.9 from 3, 82.8 from the free throw line. That's great. 3.1, basically 3.2 rebounds a game, 2.9 assists to just under 1 turnover. In the 5 games since then, Andy, he has almost doubled his points per game up to 17.8. He's shooting 65% from the floor, 66.7 from 2, and 63.6 from 3, while making every free throw he's taken in that stretch. This turnaround is massive for Oregon, and it's a big part of the reason why, yes, they lost to Illinois, but they've won 3 straight since, home to Maryland, and then at Ohio State and at Penn State. Ducks might be going now, dude.
Yeah, Jackson Shelstad is an absolute monster, and they need him to play like this to be the team that can compete for a top 5 spot. in the Big Ten. And looking at some other results, this is another one, or actually this goes back to Saturday, the other result alongside the Illinois loss to USC. We had Iowa absolutely throttle Mike Woodson and the Hoosiers. 80-65 was the final score in this one. And I saw a clip from one of the Field of 68 podcasts speaking about Indiana, and it was a justified opinion that Indiana had been playing better without Malik Reynaud. And the question was kind of, the thought was whether Indiana is just a better team without Reynaud, who's ostensibly their best player, one of their leading scorers. And I think there is an issue of overcrowding in the front court for Indiana when Reynaud is in the mix. But this team sure did not look like a good team without Malik Reynaud in this game. They shot under 41% from the field. They were just 4 of 16 from three, to 25% there. Mackenzie Mbako continues to struggle. He had 0 points against Nebraska, and then he had just 6 points and 6 rebounds in 16 minutes in this game against Iowa. Just a really, really rough offensive performance from the Hoosiers in this one. Meanwhile, Iowa, they moved to 12-4 on the season, not getting a ton of love this year, but 12-4 on the year. They're 3-2 in conference play. All 5 of their starters were in double figures, including 23 from Peyton Stanford, who's back with the Hawkeyes and playing well this year. 45% from three, just a really solid performance from McCaffrey's club and looking good for Iowa. Meanwhile, Indiana had some momentum, but man, this was really kind of halted that for the Hoosiers right now.
Andy, I hadn't realized it till we were looking and prepping for this game. Iowa's 4 losses are to Utah State on a neutral. Mm-hmm. Okay, fine. Yeah. At Michigan, Iowa State at home, and at Wisconsin. Those are great losses. I mean, those are easily all quad 1 losses. So I was, it's just like, just keep an eye on what's happening. As for Indiana, you know who's coming to Assembly Hall on Tuesday? The other team that plays in an Assembly Hall, Illinois. So one of these teams is going to find themselves on the losing end of things again. Going to be really interesting to see how they both rebound on Tuesday night, Andy.
Yeah, Friday action for the Big Ten. We kind of talked about it a little bit. Mick Cronin, after having his conversation, calling his players delusional earlier in the week, his team goes out, suffers an 18-point loss to Maryland on Friday. And I know a lot of the conversation around Mick Cronin, a lot of the defenders of coaches who say things like this, who have conversations like this, oh, it's motivating for the team, it's motivating the players, he's just trying to get the best out of them. Like, okay, if it works, great. But his team, which was playing, they're struggling right now, but coming off that loss, you try to say something like that to the press, which, again, if you want to motivate your players, say it to your players. Don't say it to the media. But didn't work. The team came out, had 21 turnovers in this game against Maryland, lost by 18 to a Maryland team that is, I don't want to say they're bad, but you shouldn't lose to anybody in the Big Ten by 18. Nevertheless, Maryland, if you're a ranked team like UCLA, Mick Cronin doesn't even finish the game, gets himself ejected, says he did it himself. Nobody likes to make things about himself more than Mick Cronin, which is what happens in this game. 3 straight losses. They've lost 4 out of their last 5, with the only win in that stretch, a quite good one against a Gonzaga team. Yep. Those 3 losses, the 3 consecutive losses by 8 points, by 19 points, and then by 18 points. It has been a tough stretch for Mick Cronin and the Bruins. The good news, I suppose, if there's good news, is that their next 5 is a relatively easy stretch. They're at Rutgers. They play Iowa and Wisconsin at home. Then they're at Washington and USC. You got to go 4-1. You should go 5-0. Ken Pom projects them to win all 5 of those games. Granted, all of them are within 5 points. So you got to expect that this team can do it. But if they go 2-3, if they go 1-4, something like that, we're going to have some real concern, not even just about this team being a top 7, top 8 team in the Big Ten. We're going to start to have some real concern about whether this team's going to even make the tournament. And it's been a rough start to 2025 for Mick and his Bruins team.
Andy, that at Washington, at USC, that's the first I've seen of a West Coast split of an LA game and a PNW game.
Yeah,
both of them are either, you're traveling with somebody to LA or traveling with somebody to Washington and Oregon. So I need to look into those schedules a little more and see what's happening. Hey, we're going to keep trucking. But speaking of trucking, Purdue, Nebraska, 104-68, crazy game. That's all we need to say. Nebraska just didn't have it.
Folks, Pat Kelsey continues to have Louisville in a far, far, far better spot than they were in the Kenny Payne era. We're going to discuss that and a few other fun results over the weekend coming up in just a second. But first, folks, attending the new 12-team college football playoff games, an incredible experience. It brings fans together like never before. I remember the excitement of past playoff games and cannot wait to make new memories this year with the updated format and, of course, 8 extra teams involved. Game Time now has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite events even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats so that you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of different tickets. And recently, I used Game Time tickets to find to find tickets for an upcoming game. My dad and I going out to Eugene to watch Purdue take on Oregon on Saturday. Getting tickets was a legitimate breeze, super easy, really good deal as well. Was able to use their feature to look at the seats and what the view was going to look like. And their super deal stood out as being the best value at the entire event. Plus, one-time ticket delivery and lowest price guarantee gave me complete peace of mind. If you're looking to take in some great basketball this weekend and you're in the Chicago area, DePaul, they have not picked up that first Big East win, and it's going to be tough to do so, but they are hosting Marquette on Tuesday. Tickets are as low as just $14. You can get front row sideline seats for $103 to take on Shaka Smart against that DePaul team. So, folks, take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. All right, Isaac, it is our 6-pack talking about 6 other results, 6 other things around the college basketball space. Why don't you start telling us about Louisville and the huge resurgence that they're having under Pat Kelsey?
Okay, Andy, we knew this moment was coming, and I've been waiting for it with bated breath. In the Kenny Payne era, Louisville won a total of 12 games, and I don't mean 12 games each year. I mean 4 games one year and 8 the next. 12 total wins in 2 seasons for Louisville. The Louisville Cardinals, Andy. I still cannot fathom it. This year, in their first 17 games, they have already matched that total. I'm laughing as I'm saying
Crazy.
it. But here's the thing. It's not some crazy, not good schedule. They've won some big-time games. They beat Indiana and West Virginia at Battle for Atlantis. And I know we poo-pooed Indiana a little bit ago, but still, in West Virginia, obviously, is ranked currently. Those are big wins. And in the ACC, they've now already beaten North Carolina and Clemson. They've won at Virginia. They've won at Florida State. And they just won against Pitt at Pitt on Saturday. Andy, it's crazy. Rain Smith, man, I don't know why people continue to leave him open. 25 points, 7 of 11 from 3. Crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. On the other hand, Pitt, embarrassed by Duke earlier in the week, and they could not follow it up doing anything against Louisville. This team has responded to the prior injury and really proud of their work.
Well, moving over to the Big East, St. John's moves to 5-1 in conference play. Rick Pitino has this team rolling with a nice 80-68 win over Villanova, who does not capitalize from some momentum after their win over UConn. They fail to do so, lose here, despite shooting a very, very solid 38.5% from 3 on the game. The Wildcats were just 12 of 30 on 2-pointers. That's 40%. Really nice interior defense from Zubi Ejiofor and this St. John's team. Also, RJ Luis, 30 and 10 for the Red Storm. That included 16 of his 30 points coming from the free throw line. That's a high for him in a St. John's uniform. He did have 31 while he was at UMass. The Johnnies out-rebound Nova 44-28 in this game. We do wait to hear more on the Devin Smith injury for St. John's, but all in all, a comfortable win for Rick Pitino's team as they move to 5-1 in conference play.
Injury after injury, man. It's killing me, Andy. I hate to see all this. Let's go to the Mountain West. Obviously, on Saturday night's Game Time, we had to talk about the crazy win for Utah State, man. I can't quit thinking about that ball bouncing on the rim like 37 times before it finally fell through. But elsewhere in the Mountain West Conference, Andy, Utah State is not the only undefeated team in this conference because New Mexico absolutely smashed San Diego State in the pit on Saturday, 62-48. Lobos, they're now 14-3, 6-0 overall, not overall, but in the Mountain West Conference. How about this? Lobos, 51-35 rebounding advantage in this game. Andy, the Aztecs, meanwhile, shot just 17 of 48, 35.4%, and 5 of 16, 31% from 3. Donovan Dent, man, he just continues to stack games. He was the game high, 16 points in this one, including 4 of 6 at the free throw line and 6 of 12 from the field, 5 assists and 3 steals. Great stuff. Donovan Dunn always pulls through. Man, San Diego State 3-2 in Mountain West. They got to get it together.
Moving back to the ACC and less about the result here, Stanford beats Virginia 88-65. And the fact that Stanford picking up a 23-point win over Virginia is just not particularly interesting says a lot about where this Virginia team is currently at, that we don't even find this result particularly surprising. Some work to do for Ron Sanchez and that Cavs team, or whoever replaces him as the head coach going forward. But want to talk more so about Maxime Reynaud, the star center for Stanford. He had 24 and 10 in this game, along with 3 assists, was 8 of 17 from the field. Folks, Reynaud's having a phenomenal season, and he's not getting nearly enough national attention. He would very likely be the ACC player of the year if there weren't some guy at Duke named Cooper Flagg. And I know that Stanford is not a team that's making a lot of noise in the conference. They're not expected to finish, probably not even in the top 10, certainly not in the conversation as a NCAA tournament team, but Reynaud is averaging for the season 20.9 points, 11.5 rebounds. Both lead the conference. He's shooting 35.5% from 3. That's on about 5 attempts per game. He's shooting 56.5% on 2s, and that's on 11 attempts per game. He's averaging just under 2 assists, a block, and a steal. This dude is 7'1", folks. 35% from 3 as a 7-footer, 21 points, 11.5 boards. He blocks shots. He distributes the ball well. He's efficient as a 3-point shooter and a 2-point shooter. This dude is really, really good. He was good last year at Stanford. Kyle Smith did a phenomenal job of keeping him, not letting him get loose in the transfer portal, kept him as they moved to the ACC, and he's rewarded them with a phenomenal, albeit under the radar season so far.
Andy, we typically stick to the guys side of things, but every now and again, something pops that we just got to get to. On Sunday, Pittsburgh, we just talked about them not doing well on the dude side, but how about this? On Sunday, they tied the largest regulation comeback in NCAA women's basketball history. They were down 32 points to SMU, came back and won 72-59. SMU led by 32 with 1:37 remaining in the first half. The halftime score was 49-18. Pitt had whittled it down to 31. Pitt outscored SMU 54-10 in the second half. The third quarter was literally, Andy, a shutout. Pittsburgh won the third quarter 28-0. The total run was 31-0 as they allowed just 10 points in the second half to SMU. This is absolutely crazy stuff. And the fact that they then went on and won by 13, it's not like they came back and won from 32 on a last second shot. They won by 13. Dude, just bonkers stuff. Go check out all the stuff on this, y'all.
That was an incredible game, and I'm glad we got a chance to talk about it. Closing out our 6-pack, talking about obviously one of the sadder stories going on right now in the world, the California wildfires hitting the LA area. Been an incredible tragedy out there and is impacting the world of college athletics, obviously impacting far, far more than that in terms of the amount of people's homes that have been lost and everything that's going on there. But we did want to mention, we've seen the impact in terms of some Big Ten scheduling on the women's side in particular, as we had the Northwestern team was supposed to go out and play USC and UCLA. They did not make that trip out there. They were supposed to play the number 1 team in the country, UCLA, but that was supposed to be on Sunday. They did not play that game. Supposed to play USC on Wednesday. USC's number 4 in the country. The games are postponed. We'll see what happens with that. The Big Ten has indicated they are, quote, looking into all possible rescheduling options and will share additional information when available. Obviously, the health and safety of the players and the people who work at those schools and the people in the surrounding areas is the primary importance at this point. We haven't seen any dramatic impacts yet on the men's side. LMU played at Pepperdine. That game was supposed to be at 7:00 on Saturday. They moved it up to 4:30. The WCC released a statement saying that it was due to restrictions in terms of when you could be on campus. Pepperdine's campus located in Malibu, so very close to where this tragedy has struck. So as of now, no updates on any other changes that may or may not be happening from the college sports side of things. But again, the focus right now is on the work that the first responders and firefighters and everybody is doing to try to mitigate the damage as much as they can for that community, which has been hit really hard by this tragedy over the weekend.
Andy, man, it's so sad to see and really hoping they can get things figured out. Look, I'm just going to make a hard left turn because in real time, the Washington Commanders just made it to the divisional round over who were they playing? Tampa Bay on a doink. They doinked their way to the divisional, like doinked in. Crazy stuff happening there in NFL. You guys, thanks so much for joining us to kick off our brand new week of Locked On College Basketball. Going to be another great week, all sorts of great games and entertainment coming up for you. If you've not joined the show both on YouTube, subscribe so you don't miss anything this week or Saturday's game night. And obviously on audio as well. If you haven't joined the Locked On College Basketball Discord community, man, it's a great place to be. Great conversations going all the time, all the different conferences, man. It's a blast to be in there. We'd love to have you as well. As always, I want to say apologies to the Lawyer family. Let's go Wild Popes and cheers to our favorite coach, the Mick Bruins. All right, guys, we'll talk to you again tomorrow. But until then, peace.